Furthest to my left,
Diane Stefani.
Michael Corman.
Scott Nelson.
John Hagee.
Jim Baumstark.
James Dolan.
All right, so welcome back. We're going to move to the section approvals in our agenda, and I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded, Mike Corman.
And I'd like to take a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion carries. And now I'd like an approval of a motion and a second to approve the regular and executive session minutes.
So moved. Jim Baumstark.
Second.
And I'd like to take a voice vote for that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now let's move to our communication sections. Dr. Deli?
Good evening to those in the audience and those joining from home. For those who find comfort in tradition, I will use this opportunity to officially welcome everyone back for a new school year. We stand ready to receive staff and students at our school buildings. And some may say, well, Dane, have you taken a look at the buildings lately? I know it can be a little bit deceiving. They are coming together nicely. We will be receiving staff and students as expected. That's not to say that we won't be working on smaller items and finishing touches as time goes on, but we're very excited to get things rolling this year. I spent some time this morning with new staff in the district that numbers, what was it, Kevin, 50? Yeah, 50 new staff that we welcome to the district, very eager to get started with children. So we're very optimistic. We're very happy to have our children back in our school buildings. Related to that is our opening plan. We are required to have an opening plan for this school year. And so we wanted to spend a few minutes to just walk through some of the component parts of this. And really, it's important, I think, to reinforce that our primary objective remains the same. We want to be as fully operational, fully functioning, with students in on as regular a basis as we can have, that we are committed to that goal. All students in person, every day. We have tried our best throughout the last 2 years to do that. It's going to continue. We all have a renewed interest in returning to the quote-unquote normal that we know it's been some time since we've experienced. To reach that goal, our school district will continue to receive guidance from health departments, both at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, as we have. The district will utilize both existing and emerging avenues available to keep students in school and as safe as possible. And I ask that the partnerships that we have forged with parents over the last 2 years continue as we reopen our schools and approach an exciting new school year. With respect to our health and safety protocols specifically, this graphic is really just designed to sort of summarize 4 key components. 1 is to understand risk, 2 is to protect yourself, 3 to take action if exposed, and 4 to take action if you are sick or test positive. We should note here that new guidance was released from the CDC as recently as August 11th. Why they wait necessarily until right before school, I'm not so sure about, but we're appreciative to receive the guidance. And I hope that you'll find in these subsequent slides directionally that you'll see that many of the areas since last year have been relaxed, not in all cases, but in some. And we'll show how that's operationalized in the next slides. With respect to testing, we will no longer be engaging in shield testing, which was last year referred to in some cases as surveillance testing. That's when we were testing on a weekly basis those students whose families agreed to that testing protocol. The CDC has moved away from that recommendation. They're no longer recommending that people who may otherwise be healthy or non-symptomatic being tested on a regular basis. We will have our Ravinia test kits available like we did last year, and we'll be sharing more communication about that availability. With respect to masking, it remains optional for all staff, with the exception of those who work in the health office and who visit the health office. That is one environment where we will have our masking in place. Our lunch protocols return to our pre-pandemic schedules and setups, so principals have situated the building such that we are back to quote-unquote normal with our lunch periods. Volunteers are again welcome back in our classrooms and for events without COVID-related restrictions. Our musical and stage performances return as they were and how we're all used to enjoying them. I think it's important to point out what remains the same and what's different, just in some clear terms. And I should also note that this presentation is really just designed to be the salient points of an opening document that you can find attached to this board agenda and is available for anyone to view. With respect to masking, again, they're going to be required in the health offices and on days 6 through 10 when returning after a positive test. So that remains unchanged. With respect to notification, we will continue to notify the Cook County Department of Public Health of known positive cases. That's an obligation that we have with the county. We will also notify families of positive cases within a classroom. So if there's a positive case within a classroom or more than a positive case within a classroom, there will be a notification that is sent out. And with vaccination, they continue to not be required. We will continue to share information on vaccination clinics or booster opportunities as they become known to us and shared with you. We simply make the suggestion that if you haven't been vaccinated, to talk to your physician and talk about what those individual decisions are for you and for your family. So nothing has changed with respect to that. Similarly, our remote learning structure will remain in place for those who are out with COVID-19. So we will have a grade center teacher available within each of our grade bands, so K2, 3-5, and 6-8. And additionally, at the 6-8 level, we'll have a one-way Zoom opportunity available for students to Zoom into particular classes. So that structure remains in place, again, similar to how it was last year. We will continue to have our building and district nurses in place doing their work. Our hygiene, cleaning, and sanitation within the school buildings remains the same. Those protocols we found helpful, and if COVID taught us one thing, that it's good to pay attention, more attention to hand hygiene, cough etiquette, making sure things are clean, and so that's going to continue. Our ventilation at 50% outside air, our MER filters are still in place, all in an effort to assist with air quality. Keeping students healthy in schools with as little disruption as possible and interruption, again, is a big goal for us this year, and we appreciate people's partnership with this. Our first assumption is not going to be run to a symptom being COVID, but we also have to rule that out. And so we have a plan in place here that we believe is a reasonable one to assure us that we are not having infection in the school building to the extent that we can. We know nothing is 100% preventable. Students and staff who develop new symptoms at school that are not already part of a known condition that an individual might have. So I'm not talking about, a child who is asthmatic or has seasonal allergies or whose symptomatology is typical of them, given a certain time of year. We're talking about new symptoms that could be COVID symptoms. And so what we have in place, although not required, is the ability to receive a rapid antigen test in the school office. So if a child is displaying symptoms, there will be an opportunity to have the child tested, and if negative, can return to class with very little interruption. We, of course, need a parent's permission to be able to do that, which again is completely optional. But if you choose not to have the child tested, then you fall into the 5-day exclusion with return on day 6 through 10, with a mask. So the district does encourage us to parents to participate by opting in to the rapid testing. We'll have a process that will be communicated for you to do that. And again, this is designed to facilitate a quick return to class. Not mandatory, suggested for the reasons I just stated. Also, a note on our ESSER funding. We're required to share how we have both budgeted and spent federal ESSER dollars. And on this slide, you see depicted from left to right our expenditures for the 21-22 school year are listed and by category. So those are numbers that were budgeted and spent. You can see the bulk of which had to do with improving air quality, salaries, stipends, and other benefits associated with Learning Lab, Grade Center teachers, and other supports, instructional supports for children. There are also other expenses that you can see there. We do have proposed budgetary figures for this school year, the 22-23 school year, and for the 23-24 school year. So the ESSER dollars do run. They are available to be budgeted and spent through fiscal year 2024. So you can see budget figures that exist there. We have opportunities to amend this budget as time goes on based on what our needs may be. So these are projections, and you can see the total dollar amounts there. Our total ESSER 3 allocation in the upper left, $3,320,000. So you can see how this has been spent, both this past year and projected to be spent in the next 2 years. So as we move forward, this is our plan to get our school year started. There could be changes to this plan. And depending on what guidance looks like, other emerging thoughts or best practices as they emerge, we will get those communicated to people. The plan would be updated accordingly. This is a plan to get us started in a school year with back to as normal as we can, while also being cautious. So we will have more information as it becomes available. District 34 does maintain its authority to implement mitigations. That's been established. We believe that many of these have been relaxed. What the future holds, we're not entirely sure, but we feel good about the plan as it exists today. So that concludes my comments on the opening plan. The board can certainly comment now, or there's another place on our agenda that's occupied with this for action.
I think we have an action section where we can ask questions. Is it all right if we wait until that section before we take action? Then we can get clear consensus answers if we have questions.
Sure.
Does that sound good? All right. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Deli. Now we'll move along to our audience comments section. This is a first opportunity for audience comments. Anyone wishing to address the board can submit a comment card available at the check-in table and give it to the Director of Communications and Strategic Planning. The Director will call community members who submit cards forward. They will be asked to introduce themselves and describe their relationship with the district. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Please know that the board will be taking notes, but we will be in listening mode only, and an appropriate response will be given in a timely manner. We also ask that you submit 1 comment per opportunity. Kathy, do we have any comments? Okay. We'll move along to consideration of... No problem. No problem. We have a comment. Yeah. If you'll just share your name and your relationship to the district, that would help everybody too. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Quaid. I have a daughter at Hoffman. First, I just want to thank everyone here for their service to the public. I want to express my complete dissatisfaction with how our schools responded to COVID, particularly last year, after about June of 2021, after everybody who wanted a vaccine had it. The burdens we put on our children who were in no reasonable danger from COVID, I feel were simply immoral. My confidence in teachers, school administrators, and government officials has been shaken. I greatly regret keeping silent and waiting for the policies to match reality, and I intend to be more involved going forward. And so just to comment on something I heard tonight, I really see no reason for a formal policy to make a student stay at home for 5 days following symptoms that I think would match most illnesses if they choose not to test. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment tonight. Does anyone else have any comments, since we didn't make that clear earlier? Okay, we'll move along. We do have another comment period if people want to speak then also. We'll move to consideration of resolutions on the consent agenda. I'm going to read the resolutions. I'm going to ask for a motion and a second for approval. We have 22060, the personnel report, 22061, the payroll warrants report, 22062, vendor warrants, 22063, board policy, press issue 109, 22064, the renewal agreement of the Special Needs Community Links, LLC, and 22065, renewal of contract with youth services for on-site counseling. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Katie, may we have a roll call?
Dolan,
Aye.
Corman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Stefani. Aye. Heggie.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we'll move along to consideration of other resolutions with our discussion and action section. And we'll start with number 1, 22066, ESSER and opening school update. Is there any discussion anyone would like to have? That was the presentation we just saw.
Yeah.
John.
So I've got questions, comments, statements, and speeches. So, Dane, I do have a question on this revision that's changed. You shared with us a couple of drafts ahead of time. But as we see it here, or as I'm reading this, if there's a child who gets a COVID-like symptom, anything from a sore throat to an upset tummy or something more serious, and which is not to say that every COVID symptom is not serious, that many are. So if that child were to not take a test at school and go home, how do they get back if they don't take a test? Because in some of the earlier examples that we had, I think there was you could take an at-home test and call in and just tell the school nurse what happened. That seems to have dropped off. It says now to return to school, connect with your building nurse to receive individual instructions. And it doesn't seem like we should be issuing individual instructions. There should be a policy.
Yeah, well, the policy is that if a child is symptomatic, our first course is not going to be assuming that it's COVID.
Right.
But we feel as though we need to eliminate that possibility, and there are a couple of different ways to do that. One way to do that would be if the parent had opted in to the rapid testing, we could do that at school. Another option could be that the parent could administer the test themselves at home. So some of this would be dialogue, I think, that's being referred to here. within the plan. So that would be another option that a parent could have. Some parents found it objectionable to have the child tested at school, and that's fine. The parent could then administer a rapid test and then be able to present the results and have the child return to school. That would be another option too. Or a third option would be if they don't want to administer any test at all, whether it be by themselves or by the school, that they would be in an exclusionary environment for 5 days, up to 5 days, depending on when their symptoms start. It could be less.
Well, yeah, I think the ability to allow parents to administer their own test at home is an overall positive, and it will get more buy-in of parents being willing to participate in this plan. Which kind of leads in to, some of my problems with this plan overall are, I don't believe we're on firm legal ground in terms of exclusion policies and reentry policies. It's not settled law. The case downstate was, primarily focused on exclusion based on nearby exposure. And we're talking about symptomatic individuals here. So, it is different. But while I don't think the case law is settled, I don't think it looks good to us. And, on the one hand, you have to watch what's in front of you, and that's all you can plan on. But you have to keep an eye on the horizon as well. And I think that this is going to put us in a position where we could be challenged. Whether we survive that challenge or not, I have my thoughts, but that's all they are. But the other issue is this, while we may have the authority, and I'm not sure we do, this plan won't work even if we do, because all someone has to do is opt out of any sort of testing, shield testing. I know we're not doing it at the schools anymore, but anywhere, and opt out of letting the school test their child. And then we don't know if a child's positive or not. It's really no different than it was last spring. If you don't want to participate in this as a parent, you just don't. And I don't think that's good to our stated goal, which is to get more participation, to keep more kids in school, to, I suppose, is that me making all those pops? I apologize. To try to reduce in-school transmission, to keep as many children there as possible. And I don't think those are bad goals. I'm just saying, when we claim an authority we don't have, it's off-putting to people, like people who wouldn't want their child to be tested at school, but would be more than happy to do that at home, just like they wouldn't send their kids who was sick with, with flu or anything else. So I would like to see us just, keep much of this. I think it's a reasonable thing, but absolutely turn the direction between us claiming to have an authority and asking for buy-in for parents. Because I think, as we always have as a community, for all of our lifetimes and recently and in the past, we don't send sick kids to school if we can avoid it. It's rude, it's not good for the kids. Most people will voluntarily participate in that. But, if you gotta have a temperature of this to get in, people don't like getting pushed around at their own schools. So I think that's why we should do that. Is A, it will get more people to buy in, and B, it'll save us any litigation. Because once this is all voluntary, there can be no challenge.
John, I look at this as we're going back to what we did before COVID. Was we asked parents if their kids were sick and they weren't feeling well, to keep them home, and that's pretty much what we're doing. And I do believe we have the ability to do this based on the JCAR rules that are submitted in this report, where it says in section C, number 2, persons suspected of being infected with a reportable infectious disease for which isolation is required, or persons with diarrhea or vomiting believed to be infectious in nature, shall be refused admittance to the school or child care facility while acute symptoms are present. So we do have the authority written by JCAR, which has been cited in numerous law cases. So if we aren't able to tell people that their sick, COVID-positive children should stay home, When can we tell children to stay home? Can we tell them to stay home when they have the flu? Can we ask them to stay home if they have measles? Can we ask them to stay home if they have strep, mumps? I mean, this is part of our ability to keep infection out of our schools. That's my opinion, and that's how I'm looking at it.
Oh, we can certainly ask, but we're not asking. We're
No,
requiring.
it says we have the right to refuse admittance. We don't have to ask.
Well, we're also
It's in the
requiring.
link to our.
I
in-
know it's
yeah.
there, as is the entire section on the order and procedure for isolation, quarantine, and closure. And we are asking for modified quarantine when we're saying the kids have to wear masks.
And that's still unsettled case law.
Mm,
It is unsettled. We are not asking students that are close contacts to not wear masks. We're asking students that have tested positive to wear a mask.
It is not settled that you can or can't do
I
it.
agree, it is not settled.
But there's strong indication on the horizon.
And when that comes, we will be able to address it.
But why wait? Why not just get community buy-in and do it now? Why do we have to enforce a law, which we may or may not have the ability to do, when we could just ask people to be as we always have been and not send your kids sick with any of these variety of
I
diseases?
think that's the bottom line, is what we're really trying to do is ask parents if their children are sick to please not send them to
Right.
school.
So I'm just saying, let's change some wording out of here, out of required and you must, to we ask. And, and show whatever citations you want, but I don't think we win with forcing people to do things.
I also think this is a living document and can change, and we still haven't gotten guidance from ISBE or the Illinois Department of Public Health. So, what we decide here today could be moot in a week, depending on what we get from the state.
We've seen that happen.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your reticence and what you're saying here. I think this is a best case scenario that we're working with right now, and the main goal is to keep everyone healthy, safe, and in school as much as possible. It's not a perfect plan. There is no perfect plan. Anyone else? Mike?
So I'm going to channel my inner Natalie Jaktorowicz for a moment. We have worked very hard to have a balanced approach in all that we've done, certainly since I've come on the board, and I think for most of us for your entire duration on the board. And we use well-reasoned thinking and thought process, and frankly, we're elected to make those decisions. We're not pushed around by the opinions of the day, or we have to make our own judgments based on the best available information that we have. And I, for one, think that this shows a balanced approach that protects kids that need protecting, in particular those that have weakened immune systems. And frankly, if we need to change this policy for whatever reason, I don't think anybody on this board will object to that. And we have capability to do that in a couple of days' notice by a special board meeting. So I, for one, see this as a reasonable approach to the extent that I'm trained in the law, which is very minimally. It seems like we're on good, solid footing right now, and I will support the plan that the administration has put forward. Thank you.
Diane?
Echoing what Mike just said and what you said, Scott.
Diane, can you use the microphone just
Sorry.
so the people on
You
TV?
can't hear me? Just
TV people might not be able.
echoing what Mike just said and what you said, Scott. I see it as a balanced plan as well. I mean, to John's point, I mean, if John wanted to, I think, were you asking to more specifically maybe draw out some of the policy or to spell it out in terms of the ability to test at home? I think that sounds extremely reasonable. But I think the plan on overall sounds quite balanced. So I'm not concerned about the authority that we've exercised throughout the duration of the pandemic.
I just have a clarifying question, actually. And is the concern you have, John, with that in the 5-day period, you might actually not be symptomatic? I mean, given that we have the right to exclude symptomatic at all those conditions there, is it that the 5 days is kind of like an arbitrary time frame, and you might be not having those symptoms on day 3? So therefore, why are we excluding on days 4 and 5? Or is it just exclusion at all based on symptoms?
No, I don't think it's unreasonable to exclude based on symptoms, but, you know, if a child can test out by testing at home, you know, which was in one of the drafts, and I think that's extremely reasonable as well. But the 6 through 10 day, you know, that could be arbitrary if you're, you know, and the guidance changes on that. But and I guess how that ties back, I mean, obviously I have concerns about what future legal action might look like. But, you know, in that 6 through 10 of a child who never tested positive, for whatever reasons, that they have to mask, or there's no chance of testing out during that period.
But John, there'd have to be some level of suspicion for there even to be a question of having a test. So they will have had some symptom, and whether or not it's a COVID symptom is the question. And so it's not as though the ask is, you have to have had a fever, you have to have had new previously like diagnosed shortness of breath or something that's characteristic and hallmark, and not opted for a test to have an ask of a mask from day 6 to 10.
Right.
So it's not unprovoked, it's just ambiguous.
No, right, and I think it goes, Jim, more to, Jim and James, I was talking to James, but I also want to follow up my point to you, Jim, or my response to you, is that it's a hole in the plan. You know, we have a decent sized percentage of people who never tested in the Shield. We had a decent size who tested, or who opted out later in the school year. And that is a pretty large populace of people who may not participate in testing whatsoever during that period if their child is asymptomatic. And if they don't, it's a way for people to get completely around the system. And it goes more to my point about this needs to not be mandatory. It needs to be not optional, but just the expectation of attendance, and so what people will react as good citizens.
But I think you just highlighted the flaw in testing at home. What was our Shield participation rate? So if you told me that the rapid test administered at home is going to be consistent across the board, I'd say, okay, awesome, but you know it's not. And so while I completely agree with you that to have the plea that, look, we're all a community, and we're all in this together at some level. This is not supposed to be, 2 years in where we should be arguing about, how do we keep our kids in schools and safe and healthy in the best possible way. And if we change this plan to not have COVID, but just to say for any infectious disease, whether it's influenza, COVID, polio, which is being found now in counties in New York, or anything else where we've kind of eliminated it from the pediatric lexicon until now it's back. I mean, those are the kinds of principles that we should just adopt and adhere to universally to keep everybody safe in school, because it's a finite sacrifice. It's a couple days.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we should treat this like we do any other diseases, which is to say, don't come to school if you're sick or infectious.
Which I think is implied here. If you are found to have a symptom at school, because that happens, kids develop, a fever throughout the afternoon or pick something up, right? Like, okay, I don't think there's an implied malice to the plan. I think the plan here is to support the students and the families as best as possible when there's a question. And if it's COVID or influenza or something else, we deal with it. And this is just how we deal with COVID. If we needed to have a comparable language where you delete out that and put in RSV, or you put in influenza A, B, I think they're all the same principles. And maybe that's what we do. There's a guiding overall plan for respiratory viruses or infections in school. These are the practices that we're really going to encourage, because we can test for all of these things.
Yeah, I agree. We should be encouraging this behavior. I mean, it's not objecting to it. My point is, why have a mandatory plan if A, we may or may not be able to, we may not be able to, or authorized to enforce it, or B, it won't work, because there are so many ways, to get around it, as opposed to encouraging the behavior of parents and families to, do exactly what you're saying. Don't come in if you're sick. Test at home, test wherever. But, even if we say, well, you got to have a standard of the test, and it comes in, it says, let's, say we, even go back to having the not the rapid, but the PCR, where does it stop? I mean, do we check the serial numbers? Do we make sure that the paper's not forged? I mean, there's just no way to make the policy 100% or even, not even that much enforceable. And so why implement a program we can't enforce as opposed to implementing a program where we could by encouraging?
Well, I think Scott, though, highlighted what was laid out for other diseases as precedent, and this just kind of follows suit with reportable diseases. So the CDC has a national list of reportable diseases, anything from, legitimately, environmentally contracted anthrax to sexually transmitted infections or other bizarre things. And now COVID is on that list. That itself puts it into that rubric. We can argue that later, but for now, it at least falls under as a reportable disease.
Okay.
So, we did get you asked Dr. Daly a question. He said that the nurses are going to consider letting parents test at home. Didn't you say that?
Right, well, there'll be a conversation and another opportunity, for instance, if a parent had not opted in for the testing and a child is symptomatic, there will be a phone call, there will be a conversation, there'll be a reminder that they can opt in and give the nurse permission to do the test, or there could be other options that are pursued. So
With the main goal to make sure that students that don't have COVID can come to school.
Right, with very little interruption. It could literally be the time that it takes to get the rapid test back.
But I do want to reiterate that the plan does kind of state that if a student has COVID, we would like them to stay out of the school. Does that make sense for now?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Diane, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just, John, going back, I want to make sure I'm understanding your concern. Is your concern that we are not explicitly enough allowing people to test at home, and there's an arbitrariness to that?
Yeah, it's pretty capricious.
Because I agree with that. I think that should, if a child is tested at home and they're COVID-free at this juncture, are we, maybe we need it to more explicitly?
Well, I guess that's, as this is drafted in this version, I couldn't agree more. It doesn't get much more capricious since letting a school nurse decide the what do we call it?
You don't want there to be any discretion, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And I would actually agree with that.
We don't make policies and say, it's whatever your teacher says, or whatever, we approved
Do you think we
curriculum.
covered
We
that
approved
adequately, Jane?
agendas.
Yeah, if the concern is I guess, I don't know, for lack of a better word, the vagueness that refers to in that section, we can clean something up that makes it more clear and
Would that make it-
straightforward.
Well, yeah, like that being one. Like, how do you return to school if you don't let the school conduct the rapid test?
Because some people might prefer to just do it at home at this stage.
Well, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah, we can be more explicit about that. That's easy to do.
I think we had that in an earlier draft. But that's one of many of this. The whole plan, even with that in there, it's unenforceable. Like, people will avoid
But,
it
John,
just because they want to.
To your
Well, we're
point,
asking parents to
I know what
actually
you're
be
saying, but
partners
we're
with us.
kind of in that boat with most diseases and most reasons parents decide to send or not send, aren't we? To a certain extent, there is a bit of an honor system, and I understand that this is not every single, disorder you might have. But, to a certain extent, we're kind of in that boat where we are working with families. We're making policies with the hope that we will get compliance. And I think that this is a good effort with a disease we've learned a lot about, that we very quickly have learned a lot about. We're doing our best. I guess I see it as the, not perfect, but the best option we have right now.
You're saying exactly what I'm saying. We are on the honor system with everything else. Why are we trying to not be on the honor system with this?
This hasn't been everything else, in my humble opinion.
That's very true.
This has been quite memorably different. So,
but we're not at that place where we were with this disease.
we're not. I
No,
agree
but
with
so
that.
if,
And we're going to be with this disease for a long time. and we got to get back to normal.
Just for context, I know I used anthrax as an example. And you can environmentally contract anthrax, but chickenpox is a reportable disease. And I think we would ask the same thing if there was a student who went to school with chickenpox, that they stay home until such time they were no longer contagious. I think that's practical. That's a reasonable ask. And I don't see us asking much more than that with the inclusion of, as you suggest, and an option for at-home testing or parent-administered testing. I would suggest that maybe we want to include it with some sort of supervision, but like that's fine. That's just me, because that would be what like an employer standard might be. But again, I think we just need to have the conversation. Like, yeah, we absolutely are asking for partnership from everybody, and this is just a reminder of the pragmatic ways that kids can be successful in school, whether it's influenza, COVID, RSV, or chickenpox. I mean, I think that should be the tenor and the tone to the ask.
Yeah, it's an ask. Make it an ask, not a demand. I mean, we're talking about where we have legal authority to exclude kids, or if we can or can't put them in modified quarantine. Let's not demand. Let's ask. I think we'll get more buy-in. And to the number of people who bought in to all of our protections originally, it just keeps eroding. And we've got to turn the tide on that. And we can't. I don't think we can count on our authority to do that. I think we need to count on partnering with the community, which is like all we're saying, these same words.
I think we're a little bit into semantics here, because I agree with points of what a lot of you are saying. It's just, I think you're more troubled by the plan, I think, maybe than some of us are. But I think what we're actually wanting to do is somewhat similar.
It's exactly. We want to have sick kids not. Yeah.
I'm a little less concerned because I guess I just don't see this. It's a reportable disease. I mean, it has been different. We've had a quick, very severe history with it, where it affected a lot of people, and we know a lot more. I agree, we're in a different place. I guess I just see this plan as not perfect, but a pretty good plan on the whole. Kind of go back to what Scott was saying originally. If we can clean up some of it and make it more.
So
specific.
I think we're kind of, we're talked out on this a little bit here right now. I would suggest that perhaps when I ask for this resolution, would it be all right if I use the language that we add the ability to test at home to get back to school? Would that
We can
be?
make that more explicit.
So
That's
that, I'll
a
add
good
that to the
That should be
resolution.
included in the resolution
It
if
should
you're
be.
going to do that.
Right. So what I would say is the resolution is right here, right? The 2022-2023 opening plan, where we would add to the resolution the ability for students that are symptomatic to test at home to get back to school if they are negative. Would that be all right, Dan?
In conjunction with the nurse or, whatever language works with,
Yeah. Will you,
as long as it's not.
can we still
vague
vote on
to
this
John's
then,
point.
if I say it like
Yeah.
that? I don't have the exact resolution.
If you want to make the resolution as amended and talked about at the meeting, then we'll have that recording to verify that. So
Okay.
as amended and discussed at the meeting.
Is everyone, so I will ask for a motion in a second for 22066, ESSER and opening school update, as amended, as discussed at the meeting, to add at-home testing to return to school with some, if you were symptomatic at school. Is there a motion in a second?
I have one more. I know you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
We said we're talked out. Forgetting COVID for now. Let's say that we were 5 years ago. We actually did have exclusionary, like if someone vomited in school and they tried to come back the next day, we would say, sorry, it's not 24 hours. You have to go back
Right.
home.
Correct.
Right?
Same with a fever.
Yeah.
Same with the fever. So like this feels like, to me, a variant of kind of that. It's just a different COVID-specific type of.
Exactly that.
It's
thing.
actually better because there's a test.
Right, but I'm just saying, we're not doing something new by excluding people, and it's not the trust me system. It's like, we know you had a fever, and
Nurse
we
would
know
say
it's not been
no.
24 hours, and you're telling me your fever's gone, I'm sorry. Our
Right.
policy
Yeah.
is it's
No,
gotta be gone for
exactly right.
24
That's
hours,
exactly right.
you go home.
It's the same, but the challenge is if you opt out of the test, then it's 5 days and not 24 hours of fever-free. And
No,
so
I
that's the
understand. I said this is a COVID
But
flavor of
in principle, it is very consistent.
So I guess that's my way of saying I'm not uncomfortable with something that excludes on a mandatory basis. We've been doing that. It's just been a different threshold for different things, but.
You know, that's true, and there's definitely correlations, but this is quite a bit different when it's a modified quarantine, which is when we require them to wear a mask.
I was referring to the exclusion piece. Like the mask piece feels, we
Yeah.
could have a separate discussion on that. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
not coming into school for 5 days.
So I'm going to ask again for 22066, Esser, and opening school update, a motion and a second to approve the resolution with the amended discussion that we had earlier. Is there one?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And may I have a roll call, Katie?
Horman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Stefani,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Heggie,
Yeah, aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
6-0, motion carries. We'll move along to number 2, 22067, Kevin Dorkin retirement contract. May I ask for a motion and a second to approve the retirement contract? I don't want to, but, you
No,
know,
I'd like
Can't
him to
do it.
stay. No.
I'm sorry. We don't have any motions. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Kevin.
All
Is
right,
there-
so moved.
Second.
May I have a roll call?
Okay. Dolan,
Aye.
Horman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Stefani,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Heggie.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we'll move along to our discussion section, construction update, number 1.
Sure. Thank you. We do have a construction update. Dave Torres, welcome.
Well, thank you.
No pressure, but I did lead this evening by saying that the schools will be open and fully functional for our students and staff. But with that, I'll let you give us an update.
I mean, I was just gonna say that's all I have to say. But I figure we'll get a little bit more into it. But good evening. As always, I appreciate your time this evening, and I just want to kick things off by expressing my excitement just as we wrap up Phase 1 of these building additions and Phase 2 of the interior renovation work at Hanking, Lyon, Westbrook, and Springman. Last week, I did provide an overview of current construction activities during our subcommittee meeting, and since then, we've continued to make great progress without any real surprises, so we are still tracking and do plan to welcome back the staff late this week on Friday the 19th, as well as students the following week on the 25th. I was able to walk the sites throughout the day today myself, so I just will give a very high-level update of just some of my basic observations just for your benefit. But at Hanking, Lyon, and at Westbrook, inside the buildings, really a lot of the same activities are going on. Buttoning up spaces, finishes, ceiling tiles getting dropped in. We've got a little bit of flooring work that'll get wrapped up in the next couple of days. All of my site superintendents are actively working with the school principals as well as the custodial staff. We've got final cleaning going on all the sites, just kind of working their way through the buildings, wrapping up site work at Hanking and Lyon. At Westbrook, obviously, we've got a big focus on the site work. So as of today, we did get some paving going, which is also very exciting. So we're looking to wrap up the paving work by the end of this week for teacher return on the 19th. There will be a balance of some sidewalks that we'll be working throughout the weekend on getting installed, but we'll be ready early next week for the student return on having parking lots completed and striped and ready to go. So we're very excited about that. At Springman, we are also pushing forward on the site work, so a lot of bodies out there today, getting that drive ready to go. We'll have concrete work, pavement work taking place this week. Inside the building, second floor looks great. First floor, we've got some work to do, but everyone is working feverishly to get what they need to get done. And again, just an effort that's just cooperative with our own contractors, our superintendents, and the district as we look to get these sites ready. So I'm very pleased with the progress. We've had quite a few challenges that we've worked through this summer as it relates to labor delays, material delays. We had a quarry strike, and there's just been quite a few things that we've worked through, and all things considered, again, I feel we're in a very good place. Specifically with some of the material delays, I know one of the big items that we've shared previously that we're working through is the transformer delay at Henking. So we still do not have a date from ComEd yet on when that will be available. Fortunately, we were able to receive the transformer at Westbrook, which was a huge blessing. So we've got that installed, so there will not be a need for a generator there. But we do have the generator at Henking ready to go. We'll have startup for the chiller this week, and once we do get confirmation from ComEd that we have a transformer available, we'll make all the plans accordingly with the district, just to facilitate that turnover with as least amount of impact on students and staff as possible. On top of that, we are tracking a list of some items that have minimal impact to no impact on student and teaching activities. And as Dane mentioned, we'll definitely have some punch list items and a few things that we'll be working through, all of next week, even after student return with punch list. We'll have guys in on the weekends and after hours. But all things considered, again, we're in a very good place. So that being said, that's really all I've got. Pretty straightforward. Any questions, comments?
I would like to express my frustration with ComEd and their ability to give us any kind of information at all. They're a monopoly. We don't really have a good way to work with them. I'm really frustrated about that, considering this came up in December of last year.
It's been a challenge not only in this district, but on a lot of the other districts that we work in as well. Even on some of our private development jobs, it's been a losing battle with ComEd, but NICOR can be equally as difficult, but in this instance, it really does put a damper on things not having that transformer.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else have any questions? Mike?
Dave, just because it's caught some energy in the community, I want to put a little more meat on the bones of the generator issue, and it specifically is, we ordered the generator early in 2021 with an anticipated delivery date of December 2021.
Transformer.
A transformer, is that what it, yeah, I meant transformer.
Correct. The contract that ComEd issued for the work was late in 2021, so it's been a substantial amount of time.
So the anticipated delivery date was December of 2021.
The delivery date for the transformer, they never gave us. But
Okay.
the contract we had to get signed in order for them to get it in their queue.
The other thing I want to mention is, I know that President Nelson and Dr. Deli have gone above and beyond in reaching out to our state senator, our state representative, and really anybody that will take their call about this to try and get this resolved before we had to get to a point where we needed a generator. As was said in the movie Argo, this is this is the best bad idea we have. We wish we could do something different, but I laud the team for being able to keep our school buildings not just open, but given what we're dealing with a change out of air right now and the pandemic, it's really important that chiller's up and running. We can't just open the windows, as an example, which some people have suggested, why don't we just go back to doing that? Well, it's not that world anymore, so I appreciate the hard work that everybody's put in trying to solve this problem. Thank you.
I went to school without air conditioning. That was really tough in August and September in Chicago. So, any other questions?
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Eric has the next 3 agenda items. We can turn him loose if you're ready.
Yeah, let's go, Eric.
All right, FY22 year in review. So just first to take our operating budgeted revenues compared to actual. So back in September of 21, the board approved budgeted revenues of 77 million. But actually we ended the year, June 30th, with 91,161,000. That's better than budget by just over 14 million. And in large part, this came from about $12 million in additional local taxes, more than we budgeted. This has to do with the Glen TIF expiring sooner than we thought prior to putting this budget together. Also several $1 million more than we had budgeted that was due from FY21. And then you get into some of the detail that we have listed here. The only other big one I'll mention is CPPRT. This has to do with revenues the corporations received last year, and in turn, we received 1.3 million more than budget, which is great, and I heard an estimate that that's going to continue on into FY23. Some other smaller variances in IMRF and trans. When we look at our operating expense to actual, we missed that by about 373,000, less than 0.5%, and that deals with some of the variances we have listed here. Smaller, more minor in each of the funds, but in total we did exceed. When you look at our operating funds when you look at all funds in FY22, you see that we ended up with a $25 million surplus. This really has to do with construction and what we thought we were going to spend, et cetera, so a little bit better than we thought. And the real culminating slide is our FY22 operating funds, actual revenue compared to expense. And we see that we received 11.8 million, a surplus of 11.8 million. And again, that's for all the reasons we listed before, none of which really could have been anticipated to this level. So again, operating revenues came in 18% over estimate. Operating expenses came in 0.5% over estimate, and resulting in the operating surplus of 11.7 million.
The only question I have is, with the way the numbers came out, I'm hoping with CFAC we can get a better projection on our future fund balance as we move forward, knowing our cost overruns and construction based on supply chain issues.
Yeah, and we'll fold all this in, and I'm hopeful for the same.
And now we have more stability with knowing what we'll be getting because the TIF expired also.
Exactly, which was more than anticipated, so that was nice for this year.
Any other questions?
So is it an oversimplification just to think that that extra 12 million is basically from the TIF expiring early? Is that a good way to think about it? Because that was about the same amount.
Most of it came from that.
Yeah. I know there's some other pluses and minuses.
Yep.
But that's how I'm internalizing. Is that sort of one factor is what drove this?
Exactly.
Without it, we would have broken even, right? Without the early TIF expiration, roughly?
For the most part.
0.5%.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Well, keep finding that extra revenue.
You can do better than 0.5%.
You can do better next time.
Thanks. Can we move on to the next?
Yes. So for the past couple months, we've been talking about the FY23 final, or tentative budget rather. That's been on display, and now we've reached a point in which we're ready to present the FY23 final budget, looking at all fund revenues of 105.8 million, expenses at 142 million, operating revenues at 85 million, operating expenses at 81.5 million. The Ed Fund carries most of the activity, but as you'll see, capital improvement shows revenues of 9.5, roughly 50 million in expenses for ongoing construction, and this results in, across all funds, a deficit of 36 million, all part of the plan. We've issued all the debt so far, and now we're going to spend down those remaining funds. In the operating funds, we're looking at a surplus of 4.4 million. Just a pie chart again showing total or operating revenues and expenses. Just to note, local revenues stand at 86%, and between salary and benefits in the operating funds, we're about 80%. The only changes are listed or highlighted in red, rather, and this just shows that that final bond declining from 10.2 to 9.5, which was the par amount. There are no changes to state and federal revenue assumptions. When it comes to expense assumptions, as we fine-tune everything, we're looking at a change of now a 7% increase for GEA. And we're going to get, the next presentation is about health benefits. At the time we put the final budget together, we were looking at a PPO increase of 9% and an HMO increase of almost 15%. Just keep in mind, as it relates to the budget, the board is on the hook for an increase of up to 6.25% on the PPO 1,000 equivalent, premium equivalent. But in actuality, that number's changed just a little bit, and you'll see that in the next presentation. In terms of transportation fund, that also increased more than we had previously thought, 4.4%, mainly for specialized transportation that we've sort of realized over the course of the summer. When we put it all together, across all funds, we show a $36.2 million deficit, and that's mainly, again, because of the spend down of the debt that we've been issuing over the course of the last couple of years. When we look at just the operating funds, again, we're looking at this $4.4 million surplus, which is more positive information given what we were just talking about. And now, just to look at what the operating fund balance would look like. And again, we're just showing FY 21, 22, and 23. Given what we just went over, it would actually take us to an estimated 78% fund balance. But just keep in mind that as these next couple of years roll on, we'll be making that fund balance contribution that we had discussed previously, and again, potentially some more money coming out of fund balance to meet the ever-growing expenses that we continue to see in construction. Just to highlight, we think that our resources are aligned to our strategic goals for the year. Revenues are exceeding expenses. We've got an estimated $50 million in construction costs. And this budget included a little bit older of a number when we thought $1.3 million was what we were going to spend in ESSER funds in FY 23. So again, this will be something that the board considers as we go into the hearing in September. Once adopted, this will become our adopted budget for the year, and so then we'll file everything with the county and the ROE, things like that.
Eric, did I hear you say not to be too comfortable with that trend line on the fund balance?
Yeah, because it looks good, but we haven't yet looked at that fund balance contribution. That would take us.
Our $20 million construction?
So is that 21 million and part of the original
That
promise?
has not been used yet.
Because
Right.
we anticipate that in
and
the
our
outer
cost
years.
over.
Right, and then any additional monies that we have to come up with for what's on the table now.
Any other questions? We'll be taking action on that in September.
Yes.
Okay.
And finally, we've got the calendar year health and dental insurance rate renewal. So for the last number of years, District 34's had a self-funded health and dental program. We've got an insurance subcommittee made up of classified, certified staff that come together. We meet with our consultant, Gallagher, right now to look at past utilization, future trends, and try and come up with a premium equivalent for the following calendar year that would meet the projected claims anticipated that are based on a 24-month history as well as a trend projection that Gallagher puts together for us. You'll see here kind of where we're trending in each of the areas, and again, when we trend above budget, that's from a historic perspective, but then we're looking ahead and trying to figure out what do the trends look like with COVID. There were years where staff and just people in general weren't going to the doctor, sort of came back, and we're seeing all that play out, in addition to several high-cost claimants that are expected to be ongoing, and that really has a rather profound impact on what future premium equivalents need to be. Gallagher's been negotiating for us, doing some good work to lower our costs for stop loss, and this past year the committee did a pretty deep dive into HMO plans for future consideration, although based on some survey work, there was not a lot of interest at the time to move to an HMO plan, but or a more affordable HMO plan, but that good work is still on the shelf, and based on these rate renewals, it's certainly something we can dig up, especially to make it more affordable for family plans for some of the staff that are in the district. So the recommendation based on the work from Gallagher and the committee is that PPO plans would increase by 12%, HMO plans 17.8%, and dental plan would remain flat. And again, These are the premium equivalents, so the cost of the plan, but just keep in mind as it relates to the budget, again, the board is only burdened with an increase of 6.25 now on the prior PPO 1,000 premium cost.
Does anybody have any questions? You've already told us that rates have been going up, so.
They have, and I do think this is above trend, but it really is based on our history and some of the folks that are experiencing challenges in their health right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move along to our audience comments. This is a second opportunity for audience comments. Anyone wishing to address the board can submit a comment card available at the check-in table and give it to the Director of Communications and Strategic Planning. The director will call community members who submit cards forward. They will be asked to introduce themselves and describe their relationship with the district. Please keep your comments at 3 minutes or less. And please know that the board will be taking notes, but we will be in listening mode only, and an appropriate response will be given in a timely manner. We also ask that you submit one comment per opportunity. This is our second opportunity. Kathy, do we have any comments?
How you guys doing?
Hi.
Hi, I did not plan to address you guys tonight, but just kind of want to have some questions I just need some clarification on. Basically what I heard tonight about the return to school, as I like to call it, the reopening of school, was opt your kid in to testing on a voluntary basis, and if you don't, and your kid unfortunately gets sent down to the nurse's office for a COVID-like symptom, which is, there's God knows how many of them, right? Sniffles, sore throat, cough, and the nurse were to call home and say, hey, we'd like to test your child, and you say no, that child gets sent home for 5 days. I just need clarification. Because that's, to me, that's like, in a way, blackmailing the family to opt in to testing, where the school needs to make sure that they have a CLIA waiver for. Just make sure you guys have a CLIA waiver if you do any diagnostic. Maybe you have it, maybe you don't. So if we're testing for one disease, are we testing for all? It's another question I have. Are we requiring parents to test for kid gets sent home? If it's not COVID, is it RSV? Is it flu? Whatnot? We're opening ourselves up to a can of worms here. And just another question, and just to keep aware of, that schools, as part of the lawsuit, they did sign an affidavit saying no masking and no exclusion policies. To me, this seems like an exclusion policy. So that's another question I have. Is this an exclusion policy? Is the district formulating a policy tonight that would exclude kids from school if they do not test in the nurse's office or at home? I liked what John said. Encourage behavior. Encourage behavior. That's what a school board and school should do, encourage. But to draft a policy tonight about keeping kids out of school for 5 days, if that kid has a sore throat and gets sent home, it's a problem. The final thing I'd like to say is I heard something very disheartening tonight. Comment by one of you guys around the table. It's just a couple days. For most kids, 1 day is too much to be at home. For adults to utter those words 2.5 years into this sends an out-of-touch message to the community. It's just a couple days. Words matter, guys. Words matter. Kids have been harmed the last couple years. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they've been harmed. It's just a couple days. We need to keep kids in school. We need to get back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm Rishi. I have 3 kids in the school district here. Thanks for your time today, for listening to me. I'm still 2.5 years into this, very confused as to how you guys make decisions. Is it following guidelines, or just taking advice from guidelines, or making your own guidelines and making your own rules? Sometimes it seems like you follow the CDC, sometimes IDPH, ISBE. Every time you want to make a rule, it seems to be a different person that you're following, and you just put that name in front of you so that you justify your own rules. And we heard that today too, from Dr. Daly and other people as well. Also, I see the board seems to be completely out of touch with what parents are doing. We saw this last year toward the end of the school year too, when some of the rules were relaxed. People were sending their kids to school no matter what. Like the gentleman before said, you know, you guys said you want the kids back in school. The parents want their kids back in school 100 times more than you guys do. And the callous comment of just a couple of days was heard by all of us in the audience. And none of the parents are going to follow that, you know. We're all going to send our kids to school when we feel they're well. We're not evil parents trying to infect all the other kids over there. We're just trying to do the best for our kids and the best for all the kids in the community as well. And one of the gentlemen here, John, I believe, suggested, again, participation from the parents. We all encourage the parents to follow rules. Like with the masking too, you give mask guidance saying, masks work, you know. Hopefully you wear them in school. 99% of the kids don't wear them in school anymore, but still you can recommend a mask if you want. We don't have to follow the rules, but similar with the other stuff, recommend what you want to recommend, and we'll follow what we feel is best. And that's what parents are doing in any case. Another point, I'll tell you why parents don't follow things. You guys had a registration process where we sign up, and there was supposedly a compact that every parent had to check that they've read the compact, and otherwise you couldn't register for school. All the parents registered. There was not even a compact on the website. I called the principal said the compact doesn't even exist. So you know parents are lying, and the more rules you put in, the more lies the parents are going to tell. So again, encourage the parents to follow certain rules, make them a lot more, you know, not as expansive as you go on and on about. And the last part I wanted to make, the most important point, has anyone taken account of the costs of all the rules we put in? Rules that were related to masking, costs that were related to masking for children learning, costs that were related to isolation, costs that were related to remote learning, mental health costs. Who's taken account of all these costs that the kids have experienced? And how are we taking those costs into consideration for our future decisions? I'm just going to end with that same comment the last gentleman did. Just a couple of days is completely not acceptable over here. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment.
So I'm Elena Plesman. I have a son, 5th grader, Glen Grove this year. You guys here need to rebuild trust with the parents. You lost a court case based on not giving kids due process and sending them in quarantine. You lost the case. Our lawyer said specifically his wording. Today, Judge Grisho this was Friday, last Friday, allowed 110 schools district which filed sworn affidavits that no mask or exclusion policies were in place and with no intention of implementing them to be dismissed from the case. He said it clearly, you cannot reinforce anything. If you do send them in quarantine, the kids, you are taking their due process away and you will be called back in court. Of course, some parents will do what you say because are uneducated, but if you are going to say that to a parent that does know what's happening, you will get again called. Like I said, you need to rebuild trust. And I'm not sure if any of you would give your child in care or nephew or niece to somebody that you had to sue and win a court case against. I'm not sure if you would do that. Another point I have regarding trust is I see here for 2 years, our comments from this room are changed completely, 180 degrees. If we say white on the email sent out is black. If we say one thing, is the complete opposite. We would really appreciate if you would say the truth of what's happening here, because many parents, when they read the emails, they don't get the feeling of what is really talked about in these meetings, okay? The third point is, and I will keep an eye on that to see if next emails, in the next email anything is gonna change. Third thing is, we don't trust you, of course, with the new systems and policies that perpetuate racist concept that is coming, and mental health. Since you have proven that we cannot trust you so far, we don't trust you with that, and we parents are working on that also. And you should trust parents' ability to decide for their kids' health. If one parent has a sick child, personally, I don't think they're gonna send the child in a harm's way. You need to give us credit. You need to work with us. We deserve that. We are able to handle our kids. You don't have to handle everything. Let us be parents.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments, Kathy? Okay, thanks for your comments tonight. We'll now move to our report section. We have the number 1 FOIA report, the number 2 Phase 2, 3 construction change order report, number 3 referendum expense report, number 4 the building use report, number 5 the disposal of surplus equipment, number 6 the administrator and teacher salary benefit report for 2022-2023, number 7 construction debt summary report, and number 8 the following meeting agenda. Are there any questions for the reports? Mike?
Just one on the following meeting agenda, Dr. Deli, would it be possible to get a kindergarten enrollment update added to that, please?
Absolutely.
Sure thing. Any
Eric,
other?
were you going to make a comment?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to point out the highlight of the construction debt summary report, and that's just to say that now that we've completed issuing all the debt, if you look at the report, total proceeds of $150.8 million, the combined all-in true interest cost was 1.56%. It's great news, it's good for the community, and I just thought it was worth highlighting on this report.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, Eric, could you also remind the audience, the community, how many, is it months or years off the back end of the debt issuance we have been able to pull back? I think it's a couple of years, right?
It is a couple of years. It's $37 million in total reduction from what we had thought. I believe it's 3.
So $37 million reduction savings in interest, pulling back 3 years for property tax owners.
And the reduced rates from what we had originally had.
Thank you.
It's lower than the Fed funds rate right now, too, I'm pretty sure. Number K, other business. And if there is no other business, I'll move to adjournment and declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.